All right, so we are starting today, uh, November 10th, 2024. Let me check audio. Audio is good. 1 2 1 2. Audio, great. Audio is great. Um, so we are just going to get right into it today with the liberationnews.org articles. A few have come up since last week, so we will be pretty busy. I'm just going to get right into it. Let's see here. First article titled today, The Workers Who Power Up Cuba Inside Antonio Guiterres Thermoelectric Power Plant by Gloria Larriva, November 4th, 2024. Article reads as follows. Matanzas, Cuba. Quote, there is really a willingness, a true dedication of the workers. Every time we call them, the response is total. We have a consciousness that a problem cannot wait. It cannot wait. It is a matter of security that we must work day and night without stopping until we return the plant to power. Until we return the plant to power. End quote. Ruben Campos Olmos, General Director of the Antonio Guiterres Thermoelectric Power Plant, spoke about electrical workers in his plant and across Cuba, who worked night and day to restore power to Cuba after the country was plunged into darkness recently. I had the privilege of visiting the Antonio Guiterres TPP soon after power was restored on October 21st. While the U.S. government and media like to portray the energy crisis as the fault of Cuba's system, it was precisely Cuba's socialism and the workers' hard work and sacrifice that brought their island back online in record time. What U.S. media won't tell you is that Cuba's energy crisis is due solely to the U.S. economic war on Cuba. In particular, U.S. unilaterally imposed measures tailored in April 2019 to block the necessary oil that powers the electrical system. 62 years of the U.S. blockade have weakened the country's infrastructure from electricity to water to roads to housing. Guiterres is the largest thermoelectric plant in Cuba. Inaugurated in March 1988, it is one of 8 major plants and is located just meters from the shore of Matanzas Bay, northeastern Cuba, to maximize access to the sea waters that cool the massive operation. Together with Lema Martinez, director of the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People's ACAP North American Department, we met at length with the leadership team that manages the plant. Then we walked through the massive 4-story power plant and the central operating system to meet more workers. Even before last week's nationwide total blackout, Cuba's electrical workers have labored nonstop in the last months to assure electrical power to the people. These are extremely difficult times for Cubans amidst regular partial blackouts due to Washington's policy. Cuba was brutally slammed in April 2019 when the Trump administration blocked regular oil shipments to Cuba from Venezuela and other countries by prohibiting all insurance companies from insuring oil tankers that transport oil to Cuba. This outrageous, illegal, and extraterritorial ban forces even non-US based insurance companies to comply or face sanctions. Now, there are only 2 ways that Cuba can obtain oil from abroad. One is a small 70,000-ton ship bought by Cuba from China, and the other is oil delivered by Mexico via Mexican military ships. Former President López Obrador and now Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum have extended this essential solidarity to Cuba. It was announced on Mexican media that last Sunday the Mexican oil tanker Vilma was headed for Cuba with 400,000 barrels of light crude oil. These alone are what has allowed Cuba to maintain its energy production. Cuba has national oil and gas production as well, but it can only meet part of the country's needs. Thus, regular blackouts have been scheduled in Cuba in recent months to carefully ration the the availability of electricity for all the population and avoid a total shutdown. But total shutdown is what happened on Friday, October 18th, when generating supply could not meet the demand due to the delay in oil delivery. Disastrously, in the middle of the blackout, Hurricane Oscar made landfall in eastern Guantanamo province on Sunday, hampering evacuations and communications. Guantanamo suffered massive destruction of homes and industry. 8 people died. In response, the Cuban people and government are engaged in a major mobilization of donations and volunteer help for Guantanamo. We spent 3 hours at Guitera's plant with the plant director and some of the highly skilled workers who explained the plant's operation and the challenges posed by the U.S. blockade. Okay, so let me pause here to read the picture description. Left to right, Roman Pares, Technical Director, Adrian Diaz, Secretary of Union of Communist Youth, Ruben Campos, General Director, Gloria La Riva, Elizabeth Farias, Secretary, Plant Unit of the Communist Party of Cuba, Yandy Rojas, General Secretary of the Electrical Workers Union at the plant, Lema Martinez, ICAP North American Department Director, Javier Quiroz Perez, Head of Plant Operations. It's a liberation photo. So this is all the people standing in for a picture at one of the power plants. The article reads as follows, continued. Ruben Campos Olmos has been general director of the Antonio Guitera's plant for 10 years. He told us, quote, before the shutdown, we had been online for 48 days. We were really stable, with some problems, but stable for 48 days, end quote. But the latest oil delivery was delayed by the oncoming storm, Hurricane Oscar. Lacking fuel, the Guitera's plant's power shut down, setting off a chain reaction across Cuba. With the total blackout, he explained, it was now up to the National Dispatch Center in Havana, where workers directed each province and power entity to slowly power up in a coordinated manner to avoid another blackout. From October 18 to 21, electrical workers across the industry took on a monumental struggle, starting up the small, quote, island, end quote, generators that are needed to start up the thermoelectric plants. The power plants, once down, can't start up by themselves. Then National Dispatch directs the synchronization of Cuba's whole network. Fuel is the key. The U.S. targets Cuba as access. Director Campos said, quote, the country needs about 3 or 4 ships of imported fuel per week, and the Yankees are constantly chasing that. How are we going to prevent that from happening? Banks, if we have the money, they delay the transactions. There is a general complicity. Even when we have the financing, there are delays in the arrival of the fuel. Shipping companies are sanctioned. Those measures that Trump applied, it has intensified the monitoring of all vessels and fuel. Quote, but as for coordination to recover, Cuba has the strength in that. There is no private generation here. There is a national electrical system which has a single command and coordination with the authorities, of course. This is why the recovery time is much shorter than for other countries, end quote. Touring the plant, we met with young workers who control the plant's computer operation, 4 per shift, 12 total. The plant is almost completely automated, and monitoring the plant's complex operation requires intense attention. Okay, so here's a picture of a shift of workers monitoring the plant through computers. I'll read the picture description again. Left to right, Dario Torrens Aldama, electrical system. Luis Dueña Cordero, electrical system. Reynold Hernandez Bejerano, head of control block. Hazel Gonzalez, boiler control, standing. Javier Quiroz Perez, head of plant operations. Liberation photo by Gloria La Riva. Article reads as follows, continued. Besides the control room workers, there are several hundreds others who carry out the maintenance, repairs in the giant four-floor complex, and general upkeep. Monitoring the electrical system in the midst of shortages, calculating the next day's consumer demand and the generating capacity to meet the demand, scheduling blackouts to save energy, all requires long hours of hard work and personal sacrifice across the SEN, the National Electrical System. Each day, Cuban media informs the population how much power will be available and announces which areas will experience temporary blackouts. The situation is still very tense as oil supply is at a deficit. From the union representative to the director and everyone we heard from, the outlook was determined despite the difficulties. Unity in the face of adversity. Yandy Rojas, General Secretary of the Plant Bureau of the Union of Electrical Workers and a solderer at the plant, talked of the work hours that almost have no limit when it comes to overcoming emergencies like the blackout. Quote, "We had 5 critical days to bring the plant back up. We had workers who were here 2, 3, 4 days without leaving. They left their families behind, but they did their job, and we resolved it in less than 24 hours." End quote. And quote again, "I was here 72 hours at the plant without leaving because the people needed us and we had to be here. That is unconditional, knowing that the family was at home suffering the consequences, but the family also understands the work that we do and thank us. That is a very important thing. We Cubans carry this in our hearts." End quote. He explained that the plant administration and union worked together to try to provide access for the workers to food and other household needs for their families at an affordable price, recognizing their sacrifice. Elizabeth Farias, secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba's plant unit, summed up this spirit. Quote, "What the enemy does not count on is precisely the unity of the Cuban people, the unity of the Cuban workers, and the commitment they have to the revolution, because that what happened here in these days, what was manifested was precisely the action of the workers. It was heroism on the part of our workers. It was a true epic of Cuban workers. It was a true epic of Cuban workers. It says that there is no blockade that can destroy the social project that we are building. Not only the workers, not only the workers involved, the party is here. The young people are here who continually have the support and accompaniment of our leaders, of the party, of the government. There is a true unity in Cuba in each one of the moments that we are going through." End quote. All right. Not much to, obviously, there's a lot actually to say about this, about how ghoulish it is for America to do blockades, sanctions, and embargoes on Cuba. Just to make an example of them, all it does really when people understand what's happening is show how tyrannical, how imperialist, how fascist capitalism is. There is no democracy here. In regards to leaving Cuba alone, right? Uh, the world has voted and they want the blockades to end. But America and Israel wants to keep oppressing the Cuban people. Uh, this is a clear example of what fascism is like, and it's part of capitalism, unfortunately. This is just the truth. This is just factual. When you understand these things, you no longer have the privilege of being ignorant and defending capitalism as the beacon of democracy or freedom or of profit or whatever you want to say, advancement. Um, so, hooray for the Cuban people. I hope that someday, perhaps through BRICS, they can create greater alliances with places like Venezuela, Russia, Africa, and get the supplies they need. I think this will be. I think this is a great thing about BRICS. Obviously, it's not a silver bullet. It is not. BRICS is not socialism. It's not communism, but it's multipolarity, which is a small step forward in taking hegemony power away from the United States so that Cuba can do its own thing without being oppressed, just because they will not let themselves be exploited. Okay. All right. So we will continue now to the next article. Uh, all right. So this is November 7th. It was election day, 2 days before that. So let me check the audio again here. Audio check 1 2 1 2 1 2. All is good. The juicy election results. Who would have thought this was going to happen? Uh, I saw the polls like a week before the election that showed a tight race for Trump and Kamala, and uh, usually that means that the margin of error kind of benefits the Republicans. I had a kind of an idea that Trump was going to win. I didn't know by how much. I thought it might be close, but I had a vibe that Trump was going to win. Uh, I was also anti anybody voting for Kamala. I'll be straightforward with you. Uh, the mentality of the people voting for Kamala is not that much better than that of people voting for Trump. That's just the plain truth of it. But I'll speak more on that later. Let me read the article. I'll continue with the article. I'm sure the article will touch base on my thoughts as well as to why you shouldn't have voted for either of them. Um, but let's see. Uh, so it's a picture of the electoral map, and PSL title is PSL statement: Trump wins as the Democratic Party moves further to the right. Article by Party for Socialism and Liberation, November 6, 2024. Photo is of the Electoral College map as of November 6. Credit Wikimedia Commons. Article reads as follows. The failure of the Democratic Party to respond to the needs of the working class led to the victory of Donald Trump in the 2024 election. For the last year, the Biden-Harris administration has embraced the political program of the right and prioritized support for Israel's genocidal assault against the people of Gaza, while stagnating wages and soaring prices have created vast hardship and suffering for working class and poor people in the United States. The election was marked by a sharp reduction in voter turnout compared to the 2020 contest. Trump won both the popular vote and the Electoral College, but this total number of voters is not yet greater than what he received in 2020. The vote for the Democratic Party candidates is still 14 million fewer than Biden received in 2020. Why did so many fewer people vote for the Democratic Party in 2024? Why were Biden's approval ratings at historic lows? There are several important factors. Some are explicitly political, and others have to do with the Democratic Party's failure to meet the economic needs of the people. When Biden and Harris took office in 2021, the Democratic Party had control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. They failed to enact legislation protecting abortion rights or providing necessary economic relief for working class families. In fact, they destroyed or canceled many of those programs. The Biden-Harris administration also canceled vital COVID-19 relief programs that had sharply reduced childhood poverty, provided relief for working class families, and maintained a moratorium on evictions. Soaring food prices and the cost of housing have drastically lowered the living standard for tens of millions of people in the United States. Only 7% of voters said that they were, quote, enthusiastic, end quote, about the direction of the country. Millions of people in the United States have been in the streets protesting the Biden-Harris support for Israeli genocide. Instead of listening to these voices, the administration kept sending billions of dollars in bombs to be dropped on the Palestinian people. The Biden-Harris administration prioritized endless war in Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, and elsewhere. They have been spending nearly $1 trillion a year for death and destruction, while millions of families in the United States are being decimated by hurricanes and other climate catastrophes and are unable to access flood insurance, wind insurance, and other necessary tools to rebuild their destroyed homes and communities. Kamala Harris campaigned endlessly with right-wing Republican Liz Cheney, embraced war criminal Dick Cheney, and embraced a super hawkish military and foreign policy in a failed attempt to win over Republicans. Harris further alienated young voters and significant sections of the Democratic Party base. As Trump promoted a vile anti-worker and racist hysteria against immigrant families, the Harris campaign joined in, demanding greater border security, restrictions on immigration, and even pledging to further build a wall that separates Mexico and the United States. Harris made no effort to counter the demonizing and dehumanizing attacks against immigrant workers. This failure allowed the anti-immigrant hysteria to grow and become a significant factor in Trump's demagogic appeal. The phenomenon of an anti-incumbent vote is a feature of contemporary global catalyst. The phenomenon of an anti, excuse me, let me start this over. The phenomenon of an anti-incumbent vote is a feature of contemporary global capitalist politics. Ruling parties recently have suffered setbacks and defeats in the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and elsewhere. The global capitalist crisis that began with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 has continued to inflict pain and suffering in all of the capitalist economies that put the maximizing of corporate profits ahead of the needs of the people. Thus, the crisis facing working class people in the United States is deeply similar to that which is being experienced in all of the advanced capitalist economies. Incumbent politicians and political parties are being punished by the electorate, but the real problem is capitalism itself. We reject the argument put forward by some liberals that the election of Trump is a sign simply of the reactionary backwardness of the population. This is false, and it's just one more form of hand wringing by people who are unwilling to take up the challenge of eliminating capitalism and constructing a new, rational society that puts the needs of people and the environment ahead of capitalist corporations. Numerous progressive ballot initiatives succeeded even in states where Trump won. For example, in the 10 states where abortion rights were on the ballot, clear majorities were in favor in 8 of them, with the only defeats in conservative dominated Nebraska and South Dakota. The Trump administration's program is nothing short of a declaration of war against the working class. The so called MAGA movement is part of a larger global effort by the far right to use racism and xenophobia to divide the working class. His focused attacks on immigrant workers are designed to conceal a billionaire's agenda to wipe out the social and economic reforms that were the result of the struggles of the labor movement, the civil rights movement, women, the LGBTQ community, and the growing movement to protect the environment and save the planet. The unfettered rule of capitalist corporations is the real agenda. It is urgent that a new mass movement be built in defense of people's political, economic, and social rights. At the same time, the Party of Socialism and Liberation believes that it is critical to build a mass, nationwide socialist movement to address the real problem, the capitalist system, which is unable to meet the needs of people and is addicted to militarism and war. Yeah, so that's why she lost, because she's a ghoul, because she's a genocidal, war funding ghoul, a criminal, just like Biden, just like all the presidents before them. And of course, she had nothing to offer the American people. Why would people go and vote for ghouls that are sympathizing with ghouls when there was already a ghoul on the right? you know. So, just in simple terms, why would people vote for Kamala's agenda when she was just parroting Trump's agenda in some ways? Uh, wasn't saying anything worthy for the working class to come out and vote. The youth that are in record high debt, that are looking for some kind of help to get their education, Nobody. She had no incentive. There was no incentive for anybody to really support her. That's why she had this historic loss. Of course, the real losers are the working class, but they don't. These parties don't care because they work for the ruling class. They are all the ruling class. They are all still going to get paid their 200,000 a year. You know what they should? What should happen when you lose an election? Your party should get pay cuts. Yeah, 50% pay cuts for losing elections. Uh, Honestly, they shouldn't even be making 50%. All of them. None of these government ghouls should be making more than the living wage, uh, like normal people. Uh, this is the problem with capitalism. It sensationalizes and puts people on pedestals that should not be on pedestals. Doctors go into $100,000 debts only to make $100,000 a year, while people that are sports uh, athletes make millions and millions of dollars a year for really contributing nothing but entertainment. The same with musicians. There's better musicians in your towns than the multi-billionaires that are performing for you worldwide on the TV. They're just put on pedestals so that we are distracted from the real issues, which are always and always will be the real issue, which is the ruling class oppressing the working class. This is always the issue, and this is why the ruling class puts so much money into dividing us into different parties, into different races, into different genders, into different sex, into different classes. Uh, but we are all the working class. We all want to live a healthy, normal life, productive life. Uh, but no, we can't have nice things under capitalism. With the most advanced, we are the most advanced technologically in human history, the wealthiest in human history, the most resourceful in human history, and we can't end homelessness or poverty or child poverty. That is a major L for humanity. And here in the capital of imperialism in the United States, that is the hugest L, that all we care about is profit and having nice cars and nice homes just for ourselves and hoarding more of it instead of actually helping our neighbors, helping our community. So yes, it is disgusting. It is capitalism. It is why Kamala lost. Kamala lost. Um, she really doesn't care. Trust me. She's still a millionaire. She's still gonna go do speeches and get paid. She'll probably get some fancy job back in California, or she'll get some kind of talk show and get hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for spewing nonsense that are just going to distract and divide the American working class even more. All right, so let's move on to the next article after I check audio again. Audio check 1 2 2. Audio check 1 2 3. All right. Um, my lighting seems a little off. There I go. Sorry, I was too dark. All right. So next article here. Mhm. I want another cinnamon bun, but I mustn't. I must finish these articles. Now, if you haven't read the description, I read these articles for my own benefit. Keeps me honest, keeps me reading them all throughout the whole year. And for anyone that doesn't have time to read them, I suggest that you support liberationnews.org if you can. The link's provided in the description box. But yeah, you can listen to the audio or watch it for your own personal benefit. You know, some people just don't have time to read as much as I do. Thankfully, I do have time, and I'm reading this stuff now. All right. Article titled PSL Editorial: The Democrats Failed to Stop Trump, but the Working Class Can Defeat Him and Win a New Society. Article by Walter Smolarek, November 7th, 2024. The photo is a November 4 Trump campaign rally in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Excuse me 1 second. My bad. I don't know why I was getting those two straw. I'm not sure why I was confusing that, but I meant Pennsylvania. All right, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Credit. Designism, Wikipedia Commons. Okay, article reads as follows. Donald Trump's victory in the presidential election ushers a new phase in U.S. politics that threatens profound attacks on the basic rights of workers and oppressed communities, but also presents an opportunity to build a united working class movement that can finally overcome the disastrous misdirection of the liberal wing of the ruling class that has failed so miserably to stop the advance of the far right. In this moment, our tasks are to organize working people to both fight back against the offensive that Trump is preparing to carry out and to build the socialist movement fighting to overturn the rule of the billionaires. For either to be successful, these two tasks have to be linked. The fight against Trump's ultra-reactionary initiatives will not succeed if it is carried out as a defense of the status quo. There needs to be a larger vision for the transformation of society underpinning the struggle ahead. What happens on election day? The election results should first and foremost be understood as a total failure of the Democratic Party. There will be no shortage of narratives blaming one or another section of the population for the outcome. But in truth, the Democratic Party elite and the entire centrist liberal wing of the ruling class have no one to blame but themselves. The key issue of the election was the economy, and in particular, the high cost of living. Trump would frequently start his rallies by asking if those in attendance were better or worse off than they were 4 years ago. And for huge numbers of people, the answer was that they were now in a worse position. In the first 15 months of the Biden administration, weekly wages fell by nearly 4% when inflation is taken into account. Although wages mostly recovered later in Biden's term, there was no substantial program put forward to address the decline and stagnation working people have experienced for years. Biden came into office promising the largest expansion of social programs since the 1960s, the quote, Build Back Better, end quote, agenda. Not only did he abandon his program in the face of resistance from senators within his own party, he presided over the expiration of all of the emergency relief programs enacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the year leading up to the election, he spent $27 billion backing Israel's genocide in Gaza while people's basic needs went unmet. Beyond material conditions, the bumbling political missteps of the Democratic Party leadership played a significant role. Kamala Harris was only the candidate for slightly over 100 days. Biden insisted on running for office until his meltdown on the debate stage forced him out of the race. At that point, he had also become rightfully hated by millions for his participation in the ruthless genocide against the Palestinian people, a genocide that Harris pledged she would continue to back with limitless weapons supplies. And Biden was only the candidate to begin with essentially because he was in the right place at the right time to defeat Bernie Sanders in the 2020 Democratic primary. And despite all this, Harris refused to distance herself from Biden, embracing his record while building an empty personal brand around, quote, joy, end quote, and, quote, hopefulness, end quote. Any attempt to blame the victory of Trump on one demographic group or another falls flat. For instance, one line of attack from liberals has been to accuse black men of supporting Trump in record numbers. There is no evidence whatsoever that this materialized on election day. Exit polls found that Trump enjoyed 20% support among black male voters compared to Harris' 78%, essentially unchanged from the total in 2020. Likewise, the idea that there was a surge in misogynist sentiment in society overall does not align with the decisive victories for abortion rights referenda across the country. In 10 states where abortion rights were on the ballot, clear majorities were in favor in 8 of them, with the only defeats in conservative-dominated Nebraska and South Dakota. Exit polls did reflect significant growth in support for Trump among Latinos. Harris won 53% of the Latino vote, compared to 45% for Trump, a 13% point increase. That Trump achieved this feat while intensifying his racist rhetoric against Mexicans, Venezuelans, Puerto Ricans, and people of other Latin American nationalities is a reflection of how deep disgust is with the Democratic Party over its failure to address profound economic hardships. Incumbent governments around the globe are facing serious headwinds. Long dominant parties of many different ideological stripes have faced several electoral setbacks in the face of a world situation characterized by high inflation, deepening geopolitical conflict, and skyrocketing inequality. This proved true in the United States as well, multiplied by the incompetence of and egoism of Democratic Party politicians. There's a picture of the Electoral College results as of November 7th. Credit Wikipedia comments, and it looks pretty red. Giant red wall. Defeating the coming war on immigrants. Trump has vowed to carry out a massive police state crackdown on migrants, pledging to round up millions of undocumented people in militarized raids that would take place in every part of the country. He has whipped up support for this mass deportation campaign using the most vile, racist rhetoric that slanders immigrants as violent criminals. The Democratic Party has reacted to this by essentially adopting Trump's anti-immigrant program, but without his demonizing language. Harris touted her plan to vastly expand border, border patrol and emphasized the support of the Border Patrol Officers Association for her policy. She presented herself as a, quote, tough on crime, end quote, prosecutor, ready to take on, quote, the border, end quote. Even more, they have totally ignored laws like the Alien Enemies Act and the Insurrection Act that Trump is using as legal cover for his offensive. They prefer to wax poetic about Nazi Germany while ignoring the authoritarian structures of the US government facilitating many of Trump's proposals. Some groups that are traditionally in the Democratic Party orbit have advanced a narrative in defense of immigrants, but its presentation as a single issue isolated from the other pressing matters on the minds of working people has failed to galvanize a sufficient mass of people. The nonprofit model of organization lends itself exactly to this kind of error, and also gives credence to the false right-wing narrative that ultra-rich individuals, who do in fact provide the grant money that fuels nonprofits, are conspiring to, quote, replace, unquote, the native-born population with people born in other parts of the world. A movement capable of defeating the war on immigrants needs to have at its core the idea of working class solidarity that applies to all people regardless of place of birth or legal status. Deporting millions of undocumented people will not lower the rent or make the price of groceries go down. Immigrants did not decide to close down factories and devastate communities. Corporate executives did that. Immigrants want the exact same thing as US-born workers, the ability to live a life with dignity and provide for their families. Oftentimes, they are fleeing war and poverty created by the very same corporations and politicians responsible for the injustices that people experience here in the United States. And here's a picture of Kamala Harris visits the U.S.-Mexico border wall on September 27th. Credit the White House. Yep, she looks like a ghoul. Ghoul talking to ghouls. All right. Continue reading article as follows. Exposing the class nature of Trump's program. Despite his hollow rhetoric about exposing the class nature of Trump's program. Despite his hollow rhetoric about standing up for the, quote, working man and woman, end quote, Trump's agenda is actually premised on the destruction of the rights of the working class for the benefit of billionaires and big corporations. He swept back into power thanks to the support of some of the richest people on the planet, like Elon Musk, Richard and Elizabeth Oilin, Mark Andreessen, and many others. Their ultimate goal is to eviscerate the economic and political rights won during the New Deal of the 1930s and the Civil Rights Revolution of the 1960s. Trump has pledged to appoint Elon Musk to lead a new, quote, government efficiency commission, end quote, that would be given a broad mandate to reshape the federal government. Musk certainly will not be focused on making sure the government more efficiently provides health care, quality education, or disaster relief to people. His mandate will be to conduct massive layoffs of public sector workers, which would also constitute a historic attack on unions, and to slash any vital social programs that help working people survive. This could take the form of the wholesale elimination of programs like the Affordable Care Act, or through the imposition of bureaucratic, quote, means testing, end quote, designed to make qualifying for benefits next to impossible. Workers involved in the enforcement of environmental regulations will certainly be among the top targets, as would the regulations themselves. Trump wants to make sure that there are no restrictions to how much corporations can pollute the air, dump toxic chemicals into our water, or subject our communities to cancer-causing hazards. And he has pledged to dramatically expand the use of fossil fuels that deepen the climate crisis that already causes such huge suffering like the death and destruction in the wake of Hurricane Helene. One of the first items on the Republican legislative agenda next year will be the extension of the 2017 tax cuts that Trump pushed through in his first term in office. This was a $2 trillion giveaway to the rich and the corporations they own, starving the government of revenue that could otherwise be put to use for the common good. Even if Trump follows through on some of the tax-related pledges he made on the campaign trail, like eliminating taxes on tips or overtime, that will not change the pro-billionaire, pro-corporate essence of Trump's tax policy. Trump claims that he will make up for the revenue by the imposition of tariffs on goods that are imported from other countries. For decades, quote, free trade, end quote, has been the consensus position of the ruling class, but that has not always been the case. For long periods of time in the United States, tariffs were a preferred tool to promote, quote, national industry, end quote, and guard the market share of U.S.-based capitalists. Tariff policy was also used as a political tool to convince certain sections of the working class that their well-being was bound up with the prosperity of their bosses. It is not inconceivable that in some industries, high tariffs would result in the creation of a not insignificant number of new jobs and enterprises are forced, it is not inconceivable that in some industries, high tariffs would result in the creation of a not insignificant number of new jobs as enterprises are forced to move production to the United States. But the overall effect of the working class would be to drive up prices and bring the inflation crisis roaring back. To rebuild communities shattered by deindustrialization, we need to seize the stolen wealth of the billionaire class and redistribute it, not tinker with tax policy to incentivize corporations to exploit people, quote, at home, end quote, instead of abroad. Here's another picture, October 27th, Trump rally in New York City. Credit Dean Charbel, Wikimedia Commons. Current article reads as continued. The new administration is likely to pursue policies that would be hugely detrimental to public health. Trump has indicated he would appoint Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to an important post in this area, giving him the chance to enact his bizarre, quote, make America healthy again, end quote, agenda that includes hostility to life-saving vaccines. Kennedy couches this in rhetoric about big pharma and the greed of the medical industry. But the country saw during the COVID pandemic that when common sense public health measures are rejected, it is frontline workers and the most oppressed communities in society who suffer the most. Science is a powerful tool to save the lives and better the livelihoods of working people. It has to be defended from men like Kennedy, who were born into unimaginable wealth and are searching for an outlet for their conspiratorial fantasies. Trump's claim that he is a lover of peace who refuses to start new wars is ridiculous. He is an outspoken advocate of funneling more and more of our taxpayer dollars into the war machine. He wants to step up aid to Israel so he can, quote, finish the job, end quote, and its genocide against Palestinians and aggression across the region. During his time in office, he took the country even further down the road towards a devastating conflict with China and nearly started a war with Iran by carrying out a brazen, illegal assassination of a top Iranian leader. And he imposed cruel blockades and attempted to orchestrate regime change in countries like Venezuela and Cuba that want nothing more than the right to pursue their own independent social projects. Who will be sent to fight the wars that Trump may start? Certainly not the children of the politicians in Washington or the executives in the boardroom of Lockheed Martin, Boeing, or other war profiteers. It will be working class young people who are sent to kill and die on behalf of millionaires and billionaires who view their lives as completely disposable. Fighting Trump, fighting for socialism. Although Trump ran a campaign pitting one section of the working class against another, there are in fact many things workers are broadly united around. Most workers support universal health care, universal child care, union rights, the cancellation of student debt, and an end to the endless wars. And beyond that, people are highly receptive to a radical critique that gets to the core of the system. A recent New York Times opinion poll found that 69% of respondents stated that the U.S. economy needs either, quote, major change, end quote, or that the system needs to be, quote, entirely torn down, end quote. The experience of the PSL's Vote Socialist campaign running Claudia de la Cruz for president and Karina Garcia for vice president is further proof of this. Many votes are still being counted, but already we know that this ticket secured a historic vote total for socialist candidates. For over a year, thousands of PSL members and volunteers across the country worked tirelessly to spread the radical message of the campaign and explain the urgent need to, quote, end capitalism before it ends us, end quote. Central to this program was the demand to seize the top 100 corporations and turn them into public property. This would be the basis to provide healthcare, education, housing, and a job with a living wage to everyone as guaranteed constitutional rights. Reclaiming the stolen wealth of the billionaire class would also make it possible to take the decisive action necessary to save the planet from the climate crisis. The complete bankruptcy of the Democratic Party and its inability to stop the far right has never been clearer. It is time once and for all to jettison its misleadership and build an independent movement accountable to no one other than the working class. Inevitably, there will be many moments of defensive struggle where Trump has the initiative and it is up to the people to stop him. But a movement capable of defeating Trump will also have to put forward a positive program that speaks to the deep crisis working people are facing. And the progressive measures we demand should not be presented as band-aids to address this or that problem. They are stepping stones as we build towards a socialist transformation of society. This will be a tremendous task, but is the only way that the people can defeat Trump and keep the fight for justice moving forward until the entire political and economic elite is swept away, never to return. All right, great article, very detailed, very concise. How much more can I add to this? This is the same message we always give at the end of all the articles, right? That this is a ruling class battle on the working class, and the working class need to unite under a socialist vision to fight back. This is the only path to victory. If people think they can be reformists, uh, it's not going to happen. Every time we reform, we just end up back here, back in square one. So uh, I definitely follow the agenda here of PSL. We do need socialist reconstruction of the United States because capitalism only rewards the most ghoulish, the freakiest, weirdest weirdos in the capitalist system, the bourgeoisie. Okay. Uh, yeah, that's a lot. That was a lot to read there. I'm just not gonna say much to it because, like I said, there's not much else I need to say. Okay, so the article on November 8th is the Spanish version of Trump wins. I don't need to read that. Editorial. Okay, so here's a good one. Last article for tonight. Let's make sure audio is all good. Audio check 1 2 1 2. Audio looks good. All right. Article titled Abortion Rights Landslide at the Polls. Article by Jane Cutter, November 9th, 2024. Photo, a march of reproductive rights in New York City, Liberation Photo. Article reads as follows. On November 5th, voters in 10 states were presented with ballot initiatives on abortion, with 7 states passing pro-abortion rights measures, including in states with currently restrictive abortion laws, as well as in states carried by Donald Trump. The movement to use the popular initiative process to enshrine abortion rights as the state level has taken off since 2022 when the Supreme Court Dobbs versus Jackson decision overturned Roe v. Wade, which had legalized abortion in the U.S. for nearly 50 years. Before Dobbs, access to comprehensive reproductive care was far from universal. However, the evisceration of Roe illustrated the truth of the slogan, quote, right to life, your name's a lie. You don't care if women die, end quote. In the wake of Dobbs, maternal and infant deaths have soared, as predicted by reproductive rights advocates. In addition, care for those experiencing miscarriages and stillbirth has been greatly impacted by abortion restrictions. Numerous women experiencing miscarriage have died or experienced permanent damage to their health because medical staff refused to provide routine miscarriage care due to abortion restrictions. Recently pregnant Texas teenager Neve Crane died while seeking miscarriage care when routine treatment administered in a timely fashion would have saved her life. Doctors insisted on 2 ultrasounds to confirm, quote, fetal demise, end quote, before giving her what would have been a life-saving procedure. Breakdown of results at the polls. This November, 10 states had abortion-related measures on the ballot. Arizona. The Right to Abortion initiative passed with more than 60% of the vote, providing a legal avenue to challenge the current 15-week ban. The measure establishes a right to abortion and would prevent the state from restricting abortion up to viability. Arizona's policies are considered very restrictive. In April, the state Supreme Court upheld an 1864 total ban on abortion. This ban was eventually repealed and never took effect. Colorado. Coloradans enshrined the right to abortion in the state constitution with 61% of the votes cast. Florida. An abortion rights measure failed to pass with 57% voting in favor. Yes, you read that correctly. A majority of those voting supported the measure, but Florida's undemocratic initiative system requires a supermajority of 60% to pass. Florida has enacted a very strict 6-week abortion ban. Maryland. Abortion rights supporters in Maryland overwhelmingly voted to enshrine the right to abortion in the state constitution with 74%. Missouri. In the state that enacted the first abortion ban after Roe was overturned in 2022, voters overturned that ban with 52% voting in favor. Montana. With 57% of the votes cast, Montanans ensured that abortion would continue to be accessible. Nebraska. Nebraska had 2 abortion-related measures on the ballot, one in support of abortion rights and others restricting abortion rights. The restrictive measure passed with 55%, banning abortion after the first trimester. Proponents of the anti-abortion initiative had originally tried and failed to place a measure on the ballot that would have banned abortion from the time of conception. The pro-choice measure that was defeated would have permitted abortion until fetal viability, about 24 weeks. It garnered 49% of the votes. Nevada. Voters approved the abortion rights measure with 63% of the votes. State law requires ballot amendments to be voted on twice, so it will appear on the ballot again in 2026. Abortion access in the state has not changed much since Dobbs. New York. Voters passed a broad reproductive rights initiative that prohibited discrimination based on, quote, pregnancy outcomes, end quote, with 62% of the votes. South Dakota. An abortion rights measure failed to pass with only 40% voting in favor. The measure was not supported by major abortion rights organizations. It was seen as not going far enough to support abortion rights. South Dakota has one of the strictest abortion bans in the nation. Democrats tried to exploit abortion yet again. The Democrats and Harris campaign placed a great deal of their hope for victory in the popularity of abortion rights. What this election proves is that abortion rights are popular, but the Democrats are not. Trump made some efforts to distance himself from the most extreme reproductive rights restrictions, such as fetal rights laws that impacted in vitro fertilization treatment, as well as supporting making abortions a state decision. Voters came out to support abortion rights, but this didn't lead to increased votes for Harris. Pro-choice voters are sick of seeing women and others suffer and die needlessly because they cannot access a simple procedure that had been legally available for 50 years. The Democrats could have prevented the Dobbs disaster by passing a federal law enshrining abortion rights. They failed to do so even when it would have been easy. Instead, they used the fear of overturning Roe to garner donations and votes for decades while actually doing nothing. No wonder abortion rights voters lacked motivation to vote Democrat. Abortion access is essential for the free and equal participation of women in society, but it's not the only thing we need. We need to truly have the power to choose if, when, and how many children we want to have, and to be able to raise those children in decent homes. With quality health care and schools, our children should not have to face a future of being exploited by billionaire capitalists or being placed on the school to prison pipeline. We need a truly democratic society where the needs of the majority of people, the working class, come first. We need socialism to truly realize our liberation. Yeah, let's just focus here on how the Democrats try to exploit abortion yet again. This is the really important part here. The Democrats and Harris campaign placed a great deal of their hope for victory in the popularity of abortion rights. What this election proves is that abortion rights are popular, but the Democrats are not. Trump made some efforts to distance himself from the most extreme reproductive rights restrictions, such as fetal rights laws that impacted the in vitro fertilization treatment, as was supporting making abortions a state decision. Voters come out to support abortion rights, but this didn't lead to an increased votes for Harris. As his first line states, pro-choice voters are sick of seeing women and others suffer and die needlessly because they cannot access a simple procedure that had been legally available for 50 years. The Democrats could have prevented the Dobbs disaster by passing a federal law enshrining abortion rights. They failed to do so even when it would have been easy. Instead, they refused. They used the fear of overturning Roe to garner donations and votes for decades while actually doing nothing. No wonder abortion rights voters lacked motivation to vote Democrat. Folks, this is another reason why capitalism sucks. Uh, Capitalism always leans conservative, always leads authoritarian, always leads fascist, because capitalism is only the rule of the few over the many. It's the ruling class over the working class. It is a new form of slavery where they enslave you by making it necessary for you to work 40 plus hours a week and extra jobs because you're in debt, because buying a house now costs like $500,000 and you only make like 50K a year. Most people living in poverty make less than 50K a year. I think the average is like, I think it's like 40K or something like that a year that people make as an average or as a medium. But they say for a person to live comfortably, you should be making like 60K a year. Your minimum wage shouldn't be 15. We can't even get the federal minimum wage to be 15. It shouldn't be 20. It should be more like 25 or 30. And we can't even get the states to move to 20 an hour these days. It's absurd, right? Okay. So this article is a good one. Those states sucks for Florida. This should just show how ghoulish and backwards Florida is. Same for Nebraska. Uh, what a shit show. But yeah, 7 states out of 10. That's like over 70%, right? Most people want abortion rights. Like, mind your damn business. Let women decide. And if you think it's bad, when they're going to go to hell, then let them deal with Jesus. Mind your goddamn business. Let women decide. Uh, it's a personal choice whether they want to carry a baby for 9 months or not, uh, whether it's healthy for them or not, whether it's the best time for them or not. Uh, for me, abortion, like all kind of healthcare, should be universal. It should be free. They should be passing out morning after pills like candy, uh, free candy. Okay. All right. So that is it for today. For the week, let's see if there's any fresh. Nope, that is it. So keeping it short. We're all caught up for the week. Everybody have an excellent weekend or the rest of your week.